Japan is in shock over the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. A gunman shot Abe as he was giving a campaign speech. He later died at the hospital. The suspect was quickly arrested.
Iain Overton joins us now. He's an executive director of Action on Armed Violence. Iain, welcome. Thank you for being with us. So, this assassination of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is so just surprising and, not necessarily unprecedented. We know a Prime Minister of Japan has been shot before back in the 30s, but it is certainly shocking because gun violence in Japan is exceedingly rare.
Absolutely. In 2018, there was just one person shot and killed in Japan in a homicide involving a firearm. So it's more than rare. It's almost unheard of. And there are actually Japanese people who have never actually seen a gun up close in their lives. This was even reported to the US Senate in an international review of guns. And the concept of a major political figure being attacked alone would be shocking because violence itself is rare in Japan. But using a gun would be just beyond the imaginings of many Japanese. And I think that this will be something debated at length for many months, if not years to come.
You told the BBC back in 2017 that Japan was, quote, the first nation to impose gun laws in the whole world. So has Japan historically succeeded in implementing stringent gun control legislation? And what effect has that had on residents' perception of firearms?
Yes, so in the 16th century, Toyotomi introduced what it was called the sword hunt, and that led to a lot of people going through the country collecting what was seen as illicit swords and illicit firearms. This was relatively soon after firearms began to be obtainable in Japan. Now, hitherto, there had been city-states that had imposed some form of gun control in Europe, but nothing on a nationwide level as we saw in Japan. And in successive centuries, we saw more and more layers of forms of gun control taking effect. And right up till the post-war years of 1945, 1946, you saw some very stringent gun laws coming into place. And today, if you apply for a gun certificate in Japan, you have to submit 13 separate forms of identification and verification in order to obtain, at most, a hunting license.
Wow.
But we've seen gun ownership in Japan fall hugely over the last few years.
It's so interesting to hear that, the difference between the gun laws in one country versus, for instance, our
and
country.
how that impacts safety and
absolutely,
firearm deaths and such.
And Iain, of course, I mean, we can assume that Abe's assassination, as shocking as it is, will somehow change Japan. We don't yet know how, but knowing Japanese culture the way you do, what do you think the official response to his death will be? Do you believe that they will enforce even stricter gun laws, and what might those look like?
Well, what we do know is it appears to be been a homemade gun. So I think that there's going to be a lot of debate around how did he get the component parts for it and where did the information come from. I think there'll be more focus, though, on where did the bullets come from. If the bullets have been home manufactured, there'll be a debate around that. If they had been bought, we may even see more stringent laws coming into place in terms of the ownership of bullets. Experts I've spoken to in the police in the UK, where we do have quite strong gun laws as well, say that it's not always the gun that's the problem, it's the criminals getting hold of the bullets that poses the greatest threat to gangs wanting to use gun violence. So I think that there will be a debate around this, but I think there'll also be a wider debate about politician safety. You heard in your previous segment from your previous interviewee that the fact there wasn't a high level of security around Abe, and I think we'll probably see more security for service serving and previous politicians who may be at risk. But I also think you'll probably see a deeper analysis of what caused this. Was it a form of nationalist terrorism? What was the essential grievance? We don't really know at the moment why the attack was done explicitly. And so I think a lot of this will be unpicked in days to come. And you may well see a response, judicial response from Japan to try and stop future attacks, because Japan very much does use the law in a way that I would say potentially America does not. They are very quick towards legislation when it comes to preventing violence, whereas in America it becomes a national debate about the potential violation of an amendment of the Constitution. So I think that in Japan we will see a pushback, but as it is, I think we'll probably need to see a review of what happened in detail before that pushback occurs.
And Iain, just quickly now, is there fear of copycats perhaps moving this into a new direction?
There was a great deal of discussion a few years ago when 3D printed guns first came out in the US, and people feared that these would be used by assassins because they wouldn't have serial numbers, et cetera, et cetera. We haven't really seen that. And I think one of the issues is about munitions and the safety of homemade guns being used. Lots of homemade guns don't go off. And we've had people in the United States killed by 3D printed guns where they try to use them. So I don't know whether copycats will be an immediate concept.
All right, Iain Overton, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.